When Benjamin Franklin exited the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a woman, "Sir, what have you given us?" His immediate response was, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it."
This is what we call quote mining. When the founders said republic, they meant democratically elected republic. James Madison himself defined a republic as a representative democracy. The reason conservatives want to call it a republic is because they're Republican. So they think republic, so that means we have to adopt Republican values. I don't like Democrats, so I don't like democracy, which is epic logic fail.
Yet most Americans today have been persuaded that our nation's governmental system is a democracy and not a republic. The difference between these two is essential in understanding Americanism and the American system. Before we discuss political systems, however, it's helpful to address the confusion that has been spread about the political spectrum. Many have been led to believe that the political spectrum places groups such as communists on the far left, fascists or dictators on the far right, and political moderates or centrists in the middle. However, a more accurate political spectrum will show government having zero power on the far right to having 100% power on the far left.
They have been led to believe, no, it's liberal on the left, conservative on the right. That's just the spectrum we all go by. And then he says, this is a more accurate way. No, it's just a different way of putting it.
At the extreme right, there is no government. The extreme left features total government under such labels as communism, socialism, Nazism, fascism, princes, potentates, dictators, kings, any form of total government. Those who claim that Nazis and fascists are right-wing never define their terms. This amounts to spreading confusion.
See what he did there? He made a spectrum so he could put Nazism and fascism on the left. Nazism and fascism are on the right because of their views on equality. Socialism and communism has the view that we're 100% equal, whereas Nazism has the view that certain people are inherently superior and others inherently inferior, whereas fascism has the view that the rich and the corporatists have to run things because they have the lesser of society doesn't have the ability to do so, they're not tough enough, etc.
But suppose the majority decides to take away one's home, or business, or children. Obviously, there has to be a limit. The flaw in democracy is that the majority isn't restrained. If more than half the people can be persuaded to want something in a democracy, they rule. What about republic? Well, that comes from the Latin, res meaning thing, and publica meaning public. It means the public thing, the law. A true republic is one where the government is limited by law, leaving the people alone.
In both systems, you go by the laws that were enacted by majority rule.
They chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy. Why? Let's demonstrate the difference in the setting of the Old West. Consider a lynch mob in a democracy. 35 horseback riders chase one lone gunman. They catch him, and they vote 35-1 to hang him. Democracy has triumphed, and there's one less gunman to contend with. Now consider the same scenario in a republic. The 35 horseback riders catch the gunman and vote 35-1 to hang him, but the sheriff arrives, and he says, "You can't kill him. He's got his right to a fair trial." So they take the gunman back to town. A jury of his peers is selected, and they hear the evidence and the defense, and they decide if he shall hang. Does the jury even decide by majority rule? No, it has to be unanimous or he goes free.
Because we have no laws or police in democracy, right? It's not like in a republic we vote laws into action through majority rule, right? Also, a judge in some cases can actually override a jury. That's also another piece of information. The major failure in his example is that he's not comparing democracy to a republic. He's comparing anarchy to a republic. Because in a democracy, we would vote the laws, and then we'd follow those laws. Just like in a republic, there's no difference.
James Madison, rightly known as the father of the Constitution, wrote in essay number 10 of the Federalist Papers, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." Alexander Hamilton agreed, and he stated, We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy.
More quote mining. Yay! First off, the Madison quote, he was talking about a direct democracy. And Hamilton quote just, oh yeah, dude, you missed a fail.
Based on what they knew of Solon's laws, they created the 12 tables of the Roman law and in effect built a republic that limited government power and left the people alone. Since government was limited, the people were free to produce, with the understanding that they could keep the fruits of their labor. In time, Rome became wealthy and the envy of the world. In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed. They forgot that the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. When government power grows, people freedom recedes. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman Constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet, and they went on the dole. Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets, demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security. Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars.
That's a bunch of nonsense. What happened was the rich were so used to lavish lifestyles, and when the economy started to decline, they needed more money so to continue buying things from China and elsewhere. So what they did is they exploited and taxed the hell out of the poor, and then when this wasn't enough, they had to move on to the middle class. And then they killed the middle class, and then there was no more middle class. They had the upper class and the lower class. And then eventually the poor got fed up and they left and started making roads and highways unsafe. So the wealthy made their operations self-sufficient, so they wouldn't have to use and take unnecessary risk using these highways and roads, which killed trade. And then, religion, pagans, Christianity, all the civil wars and revolts, etc., that also contributed.
Thus, democracy itself is not a stable form of government. Instead, it is the gradual transition from limited government to the unlimited rule of an oligarchy. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite.
That's what you call a false dichotomy. That's all that is.